Joining us is Bob Cabana, Director of the Kennedy Space Center. Bob, it's really nice of you to take the time out to join us here in Mission Control.
It's my pleasure, Kyle. The only way this could be better is if I were sitting on console with you. I miss my days as a Capcom.
Well, you know, I was going to touch on all of that stuff. You've got such a great background and wide, varied background in not only space flight on orbit, obviously, but obviously on the ground with all that you've done since you joined NASA back in 1985. Not to date you, obviously, but I know you worked. I know you worked here in Mission Control, and of course that's where we're talking to you from, is the station flight control room.
Yeah, I've been blessed. I've had a great career at NASA, but it's not over yet. We still got a lot of good stuff to do, and we're making great progress towards the future.
Well, exactly. You know, I was going to ask you is you know, what's more challenging, what you're doing now or flying in space, but I'm not sure that one is less challenging than another. But can you imagine?
Well,
that
I volunteered.
Yeah.
I volunteered to the chief of the astronaut office. I'd be willing to take that year flight, anything to get out of wearing a coat and tie to work.
Well, if you worked in MCC, I guess you don't have to, but it's probably something that would be more appropriate to wear. But can you imagine that it's been, let's see, your first flight, 1990. Can you imagine from that point to where you are now, that we now have a space station where crew members are living on board permanently?
I know, and an amazing space station at that. I can't believe it's been 14 years since we united Unity and Zarya together. In fact, today, I guess when this airs, it'll be EVA Day, but today while we're talking, this was the day that we rendezvoused and joined Unity to Zarya, or Zarya to Unity.
Yeah, and you know, STS-41 was what, 4 days, and incrementally, you know, your second flight, which was essentially a laboratory flight on a duration that was obviously shorter than what we're doing with station. But you know, you guys performed on that flight something like 80 experiments, and I was talking to Chris Hadfield and Tom Marshburn earlier this week, and they relayed that during their increment, both they're gonna be performing something like 130, but these are experiments that are ongoing, that they interact with and don't interact with telerobotics or telescience. It's kind of an evolution that we anticipated, but you know, now it's here.
Yeah, well, that lab flight that we flew on, that was actually my third flight, STS-65. And at the time, we set the record for the longest shuttle mission. It was 16 days. And that got surpassed by a couple of days. But, you know, we thought a little over 2 weeks in space was really a long flight. And, yeah, we had 81 experiments from around the world. And we were, you know, talking to the folks up at Marshall through the Payload Ops Center up there, controlling stuff, as well as Houston. And, you know, I look at what we're doing on Space Station now, and I think, you know, a lot of what we learned got applied to how we're operating on Space Station, but it's all, I mean, this is the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to go to space and actually be involved with the experiments, be able to make changes. This is exciting stuff that's going on.
It's essentially like, you know, you view a shuttle flight, you obviously know better than I, but, you know, a shuttle flight of 16 days that's considered a laboratory flight is very structured in terms of timeline, and 16 days versus like you just mentioned, what a real laboratory is like on station, where you can allow something to play out over a longer period of time, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, even those guys on the space station, hey, they're pretty darn busy up there. There's not a whole lot of free time. I know on the shuttle flights, people always ask me what it's like, and I said, gee, you hardly have time to look out the window. In fact, I always told first-time flyers, make sure you take, you know, 5-10 minutes just to yourself and stick your nose up to the window and make a memory, because, I mean, we'd be working, you know, as soon as we get up in the morning, we'd be working in our post-sleep, and we'd work into our pre-sleep in order to get everything done that we needed to do.
Yeah, and the transition from for you from STS-41 and to STS-53, those were fairly short duration flights. And do you remember, in terms of when you got assigned to STS-65 and then later on to 88, but 65, the difference between those 4-day flights, was it dramatic in terms of preparation? Obviously, a lab flight you prepare a lot longer
Oh,
for, but that was your first command after 41 and 53.
absolutely. I mean, things I remember. First off, a lot of training with the payloads and the crew, but I remember being on orbit. I mean, it seemed like a long time. I mean, 2.5 weeks actually, when you compared it to those shorter 5 and 7 day flights, being up there for 2 weeks seemed more like it should be. You really got accustomed to being in space. The other thing I remember is after STS-53, as a pilot coming around the hack, I just felt so heavy on both those flights, and I thought, man, how do you land a space shuttle? Feeling all that gravity as you come back into the G field. And when I actually got to land STS-65, I never even felt gravity. I had so much adrenaline going; it was pretty amazing.
And the other aspect, I guess, between 41, 53, and 65 is that flight obviously being longer, but you also, it was kind of your introduction to kind of an international crew because you had Chiaki on that flight as well, right?
That's right, and it was experiments from around the world. We had Japanese ESA experiments, so it was very much an international aspect to the mission, and it was setting the stage for how we operate on the space station. When I look at operating on the space station, the international aspects of it, yes, we've been working with our international partners, the Europeans and Japanese, for a long time, but getting ready to build a space station with the Russians, the Shuttle Mir program was crucial to building that relationship that we needed to be successful with the International Space Station and the Russians.
And then while Shuttle Mir was going on, that you had already been in the mix for. Well, I guess during that time you were on the ground. Were you chief of the astronaut office by then?
Yep, I was, in fact. Norm Thagard and Norm was prime and Bonnie was backup for that first flight. And one of my first duties as chief of the astronaut office was to go over and visit them in Star City and see how their training was going. And that was my first introduction to Moscow winter. And actually, I felt kind of at home. It was a lot like being up in northern Minnesota.
Well, I was going to say, being from Minnesota, then you're pretty used to that.
It was very, very much the same, but that was a challenging time because we were flying 7-8 shuttle missions a year, doing Shuttle Mir, doing Space Lab missions, Hubble repair missions. It was a lot of work going on, but we were also getting ready to build the International Space Station, and it was in its design phase. And I spent those 3 years as chief of the astronaut office, and I was very fortunate to get to be assigned to command that first space station assembly flight. And man, that was special.
Yeah, I was going to say now. So it has been 14 years now since STS-88, which obviously kind of inaugurated the assembly of the station. And do you obviously recall? But of course, Zarya was launched in late November. What are your memories of where you were watching Zarya's launch, knowing that the way things were laid out, that you guys were, I guess, ready to go about 2 weeks later?
We were all in my house in Nassau Bay, November 20th, in the evening, watching Zarya launch. And as soon as it was launched and was successful, we knew we were going, and we were all pretty excited. That was neat. And then, a couple of weeks later, here we are down at the Cape, getting ready to launch with Unity. And the first night we went out, and we had an issue starting one of the APUs. And by the time everybody figured out, that we were okay to go, it was too late. We didn't have the performance margin to go, and we stopped the count at 18 seconds and didn't go. And then the next night we went back, and it was flawless. It was a perfect launch, and it set the stage for the whole mission. It just went flawlessly. It was really outstanding. The rendezvous, I'll never forget it. It was, right down the way it was supposed to be. And the one thing that I will never forget, I'll share one quick story with you. We were waiting to get over a Russian ground site. We'd flown Unity into the payload bay. It was about 3 feet from the end of the arm, just waiting for Nancy to reach over and grab it. And we had to get over a Russian ground site to have them confirm that the FGB was in free drift. So when we grabbed it with the arm, it didn't fight the arm and break it. And so we're just waiting. Everything's perfect. And we reached a dead band in the attitude of the shuttle. And when we fly a rendezvous, we allow the autopilot to hold our attitude, pitch, roll, and yaw, and then we just control the translations. And when it reached the edge of a deadband where it fired the jets to center it back up, it caused the big jets fire, and it isn't a pure rotation. It couples into a translation. And all of a sudden, this 45,000-pound mass is moving down into the payload bay and toward the arm. And I fired the jets to back away from it, and nothing happened. And we were in the BDAP, which was programmed at that point in the mission for very fine control. And I real quick switched over and selected the ADAP to get more control power, and we got moving away from it, and then back in, and got everything centered up again, and then got cleared to grapple it. But for a while there, it was pretty tense. It was kind of exciting. And one of my crewmates, Jim Newman, PhD, smart guy, wrote a lot of our rendezvous training software. He always had advice and for what we ought to be doing during the rendezvous. And when that happened, it was just dead silence in the cockpit. And afterwards, I said, Jim, I said, how come you didn't say anything? Oh, he says, I know when to keep my mouth shut. It was pretty tense there for a minute. But then everything worked out perfect, and Nancy grabbed onto it, and we lifted it up above the node and got it lined up with the pressurized mating adapter, and fired the jets to bring the two pieces together, and they've been together ever since.
And let's see, you left behind, let's see, I'm looking at trying to do the math while we're talking, and that looks like about 68 plus 5, so about 75,000 pounds of mass that you guys left behind, and now the latest numbers that I'm looking at are very close to about 900,000 pounds of mass that make up the entire station, and you guys were part of that core. It's quite a legacy to leave behind, to look up and watch it fly over, I guess, periodically, and know that that you were part of at least the initial stage of that whole thing coming together.
It really is. I mean, we had an amazing team, and it just shows what we can accomplish when we all work together toward a common goal. I mean, nobody thought. You look back on the assembly of the space station, and if you look back at the beginning, everybody said there was this wall of EVA. We're never going to be able to do all the EVAs, and look at how smoothly every one of them went. And yeah, there were some hiccups along the way, but the team improvised, the team came back the next day, whatever. We were successful on all those EVAs, building that space station with no major hiccups, and that is just truly amazing. I remember going in for the first time. Everybody kept saying, who's going to be the first one in? I wouldn't tell anybody. And when it came time and we opened the hatch, I just kind of had Sergei Krikalev up alongside me. I just kind of waved my arm into the hatch, and we went in side by side. And the node, I mean, it was empty, and the FGB was empty. And I look at pictures of it now, and I see all the equipment that is in both of those modules now, and it's pretty amazing. It was very roomy, especially after being on the shuttle, to get inside the node and have all that space. And as we worked through the procedures that we had for getting things ready for that first crew.
Well, I know without question that you would love to go back and see it, but obviously you've got an important role now as well, and the shuttle, the legacy that the shuttle leaves behind is the space station and all the other scientific instruments like Hubble, like you mentioned up there, and you guys launched deployed Ulysses on your first flight, but when you look forward now, the shuttle's retired. But there's so many things that are going on, and obviously you're at KSC, and you describe a little bit about some of the transitional things that are going on relative to like Orion and Commercial Crew that you guys are kind of starting to work on down there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the shuttle was phenomenal. The 30 years that we flew shuttle, look at what it accomplished. And it truly is an amazing vehicle, and we couldn't have done the space station or many other things without it. But, it is time to move on, and change is hard, but you can't have something better without change, and we are now focusing on exploring beyond our home planet once again, being able to leave planet Earth with the Space Launch System and the multi-purpose crew vehicle. We're enabling commercial operations to low Earth orbit. Commercial crew program is doing an outstanding job as we narrow down to finally select a commercial contractor that we can contract with to fly our crews to the International Space Station. And it's a great partnership with the Johnson Space Center. It's a 50-50 between us as we work that program to make it happen. The progress that we're making down here at the Cape, it's phenomenal. I mean, if you look at the northern pad, pad 39B, all the shuttle infrastructure is gone. It's got a state-of-the-art lightning protection system on it. We pulled all the copper wire out and replaced it with fiber optics. It's got digital control systems. That, people look out at the launch pads and it looks like this mound of dirt and cement, but that is a complex underneath there that we're upgrading now for the future, refurbishing the propellant distribution systems to make that a viable launch complex for another 20 plus years. We've refurbished one of the firing control rooms to support multiple operations from the same control room, easily reconfigurable. We've pulled all the shuttle infrastructure out of High Bay 3 in the vehicle assembly building as we prepare for the Space Launch System, that new rocket. And we're designing the platforms such that they're adjustable. So that as the vehicle evolves, it's not a fixed structure in there, and when we change the vehicle, we're stuck, and we got to redo everything. We're making it adjustable so it adapts to an evolving vehicle. Initially starting out with 5-segment solid rocket motors, heritage hardware, 4 shuttle main engines. I was over at Stennis Space Center here a few weeks ago and saw those engines in storage over there getting ready for the future. The multi-purpose crew vehicle. We are building the very first one right now here in High Bay over in the Operations and Checkout building at KSC. Lockheed Martin, in a partnership with the state of Florida, they refurbished the High Bay. It's a state-of-the-art processing facility now, assembly facility. And the first vehicle is over there getting ready for a flight in 2014 aboard a Delta IV rocket to test the thermal protection system and other systems on it. I think we've seen the progress that SpaceX has made going to the International Space Station with the Dragon vehicle, and they want to evolve that Dragon capsule into the Dragon Rider and be able to fly crew on it. And our commercial crew program is working through Space Act agreements with SpaceX for the Dragon Rider, Sierra Nevada for the Dream Chaser, which would fly on an Atlas V rocket, and Boeing with the CST-100 capsule also on an Atlas V. And Boeing plans on building and processing their vehicle in OPF Bay 3, in partnership with the state of Florida. Here's a facility that we have no use for, we can't afford to maintain, and we've turned it over to the state of Florida, and they are refurbishing it and going to get Boeing in there for their CST-100. So we're looking at what infrastructure we actually need for the future down here, what we don't need, which doesn't support anything that's old, we're going to tear down and save costs on. What still has a another need for the future and can enable commercial operations. We're looking at Space Act agreements and enhanced use lease in order to allow commercial companies to utilize that excess capacity that we have to make commercial operations to low Earth orbit more viable. So just an awful lot of stuff going on down here, and great progress is being made in all areas. So, the future, I think, is very exciting. To think that we're going to leave planet Earth again, be able to go, off to asteroids, to the moon, to Mars, to wherever with an evolvable architecture, it's really exciting. And, low Earth orbit, we've been going back and forth to low Earth orbit for 50 years. I think it's about time we trusted that to somebody else to do that. We know how to do it, and we can focus on the really tough job of exploring.
Yeah, that's great. And, of course, part of that is the evolution of the human spaceflight in terms of duration. And, of course, we've got the crews up there on roughly 6-month rotation, and we just named the 2 crew members that are going to go and live on the ISS for a year. So, your first flight was 4 days, and then Scott Kelly and Mikhail Kornienko's next flights will be, 1 year in durations, and that probably will be considered at some point, hopefully, maybe just a baby step for the kind of durations that we're looking toward with Orion and, possibly future spacecraft.
Well, we still have so much to learn. I mean, we have learned tremendous amounts about human physiology in a microgravity environment. We're fortunate in Earth orbit that we're protected by our magnetosphere from the radiation of space. But we have to come up with better means of shielding crews from radiation on these long-duration flights as we leave planet Earth. Right now, the crews on orbit exercise for 2 hours a day, aerobic and strength resistive exercise. And we found that, that's mandatory to get crews home with minimal bone loss, with, muscles that still work. Systems-wise, we have to do a better job designing our environmental control systems so that, they'll actually last for a year and a half. So we can go someplace like Mars with current propulsion technology. My example that I always use is the Electron on the Russian side that generates oxygen through electrolysis. It's got a 285-day design life. It gets replaced every 285 days, and during that time, there are constant repairs on it, as there are on many of our systems, the Cedar, you name it. And we are using the space station as a test bed to refine and make those systems more reliable and better so that we can actually make these trips beyond planet Earth.
Well, it is definitely an exciting time, and we really appreciate you taking some time out to visit us here in Mission Control and talk about not only the past and the anniversary of STS-88, the start of assembly, but also what's in store for us for the future. So, Bob, we really appreciate you joining us. Thanks a lot.
Oh, Kyle, it's my pleasure. NASA is a phenomenal team, and I have no qualms about our future because I've seen the people that are coming to work for us and they currently work for us, and I know that if you challenge them and give them the tools to get the job done, they can do anything. And I believe we have an outstanding future in front of us.